Every year on the third Saturday in September, Detective Comics fans around the world celebrate what's come to be known as Batman Day. Yep, 2019 marked the 6th anniversary of this corporate holiday, and I thought it'd be fun, based on that, to go through some of the reasons why I really love this character. I mean, you don't get to be not just a national but an international holiday without being a well-loved, well-known, popular for many decades character like Batman is. So let's go into at least my 5 personal reasons why I love this character. And after you watch my list, please share in the comments what you love about Batman as well. But I want to start with number 1. What do I love about Batman? His wonderful toys. You knew this was going to make the list, so why hold off? Why keep you in suspense any longer? All the gadgets, the Bat gadgets that Batman has, whether it's the Batmobile, the Batwing, Bat Shark repellent, it's just, he's got an item for every situation. That's, I think, part of the appeal for young kids, especially like when I was a kid. I know that I loved the fact that Batman had all these gadgets. So I assume, kids probably today are still drawn to the character for much the same reason. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2 is, you may have heard this nickname before, but Batman's nickname of Prep Time, which is just another way of saying Batman, you give him enough preparatory time, you give him enough time ahead of the battle to prepare, and he will absolutely win that battle. Another thing about Batman as Prep Time is essentially it's implying that he's always the smartest character in the room. Like, he's got the most tactical understanding of what needs to be done. It's kind of like if you've ever seen the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, where you can just see 10 steps ahead of his opponent in a battle. Well, imagine for Batman, it's that times 1,000. Really good representations of this in comics over the years have been in those written by Grant Morrison, who had a lengthy run writing the character in the mid-2000s, and also before that also wrote him in the Justice League. So you really got a sense of Batman having a plan, not just to take down every villain, but also this was a story there. I think this one was by Mark Waid, though, where Batman's plans to defeat his fellow Justice League members were used against him and the rest of the team. So sometimes, that's the other implication there. Sometimes prep time, being too prepared, can go wrong. But I've always thought it's an interesting dynamic and character trait for Batman, and I love it. So first 2. Number 3, the Rogues Gallery, all of Batman's villains. I mean, what kind of hero would he be if it was just him hanging out with the Bat family, having a good time? There's got to be villains, there's got to be conflict. And at the top of the pyramid there, I think we all agree, Joker. He's even getting his own movie coming up in the next week or so. But other ones that are really popular, and this is, I think, what helped make the TV show in the 60s so good too, is they just had so many killer actors come in and portray these incredibly idiosyncratic and strange and weird and wonderful characters like the Joker and the Riddler and Catwoman and the Penguin and Mr. Freeze. And, even in more recent years, there's been some nice additions to the canon, such as Paul Dini giving us Harley Quinn for Batman the Animated Series, as well as in the books, I believe Chuck Dixon originally writing the character of Bane, who broke Batman's back. But I don't know. Those are both in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I wonder if there's anything even more recent that, like the last Batman comic I read, I stepped in to see the death of Alfred. It was not good, but it seemed like there was a villain in there named Gotham Girl. So maybe that's the new villain on the block. I can't really say, but, even if they haven't made new villains, the ones they've got are absolutely classic. Scarecrow too. Bunch of them. Mad Hatter. I could go on and on. You could tell. But next up, those are the first 3. I really love number 4. A reason I love Batman is the adaptability of this character, both between mediums, like he works well in video games, cartoons, movies, TV shows. There's not a medium that Batman hasn't conquered, except for, I guess, the Russian novel. And the 5th reason I love Batman is absolutely the most important reason, and that is all the creative talent that has worked on this character over the last 80 years. That's right, this character's been in existence for pretty close to a century. So some of that, it's talent in every type of creative medium too. There's all the actors that have played Batman. There's the musicians that have contributed to the soundtracks for those Batman movies. There are all the people who create the video games and the cartoons, all the animators and programmers there. And then, of course, there's going back to the comics, there's the writers and the artists who created some of the finest Batman stories, whether that's The Top of the Mountain, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, or classic stuff from the 50s and 60s by Sheldon Moldoff, Dick Sprang, other people, many people who ghosted. They did the work under the name Bob Kane, but it was Bob Kane collecting a paycheck while other people were actually creating the art. But I'll get back to that in a second. Interesting story. But then more modern artists, I think my first Batman comic was maybe drawn by Jim Aparo. Great guy. I really loved following that shortly after Nightfall. Kelly Jones did a run. He gave Batman the huge ears, the giant ears on the cowl. And I always love that interpretation. Mike Mignola, this is kind of me doing Jim Lee by way of Mike Mignola. Like it's a Jim Lee pose from a Batman comic he drew, and I'm kind of making a little more abstract. Maybe not better, but a little more abstract. Just put some style on it. We have to give credit to Batman creator Bob Kane, kinda, right? Because I think we all know the story now that Bob Kane doesn't necessarily deserve sole creative credit for Batman. A lot of that has to go to his scripter, the guy who was writing a lot of those early Batman stories, Bill Finger, who created pretty much everything we know, well, much of what we know about the Batman mythos, whether it's the name Bruce Wayne, the origin, so much of it comes from Bill Finger. Bob Kane actually did an interesting, if you ever read the book Men of Tomorrow, which was a somewhat biography, history of the golden age of comics as Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and Bob Kane were creating and selling their Superman and Batman characters to DC Comics in the 30s and early 40s, and kind of the fallout from that. And Siegel and Shuster famously got a raw deal from DC selling Superman. Like DC, now AT&T, owns this character lock, stock, and barrel, and they got nothing, although they were able to negotiate a better deal 30, 40 years after this had happened. But Bob Kane, a little bit smarter, a little bit sneakier, because what he managed to do was Bob Kane lied to DC at contract renegotiations. He created the character, in 1939, and then contract negotiations 7 years later in 46, he lied and said, oh yeah, I was underage, so that contract we had is null and void, so we really got to renegotiate. I don't know exactly what Bob Kane was able to negotiate in his contract, but I know I read this that he got a guaranteed, like a huge page rate, so much that he was able to pay other artists, like I mentioned before, like Sheldon Moldoff to draw the pages for him. So. But, what can you really say about Bob Kane? I mean, ain't he a stinker? The other thing about Bob Kane is much of the original Batman art he created, like Detective Comics 27, was outright lifted. He didn't necessarily cite his influences, so people accused him of plagiarism of another artist, Henry Valley, who did early pulp comic novel things that Bob Kane copied a lot from when he was drawing his initial Batman stories. So you got to keep all that in mind too. Take his sole creator credit with a grain of salt. Although it has been nice in recent years, DC has given more credit to Bill Finger for his contributions to the character. But all the things that I love about Batman, there is one thing that I don't love about this character, and that is the fact that DC and Time Warner and AT&T still have a monopoly on this character's use 80 years down the road. Bob Kane long gone, Bill Finger long gone. Anyone with any sort of reasonable moral claim to the ownership of Batman as a character. And, keep in mind, Batman as a character is not just heavily lifted in terms of the art from Henry Valley's art, but is also very heavily influenced by other pulp characters like the Shadow, and straight up earlier playboy turned eccentric crime fighter Zorro, who had his own cave. He didn't call it the Zorro cave, but he kept his horse and all his weapons in a cave below his mansion. So similarities there. But like I was saying, at this point, 80 years in, I think, in all fairness, Batman should be ultimately in the public domain at this point. Anyone should be free to do their version of Batman stories. At the point where the creators are no longer with us, and everybody has about as equal a moral claim to understanding or cherishing Batman as anyone else. I mean, when you get to a holiday, when you get to the point where people are willing to say, oh, it's Batman Day, it seems kind of silly to say, yeah, it's Batman Day, but just this one company owns Batman. I mean, that's kind of strange, I think, just on the face of it. But, you know, I'm open to disagreement too, so let me know in the comments where you stand on that, and more importantly, where you stand on the character of Batman. Do you love this character? Do you hate him? Why? Just let me know in the comments. And if you like the video, as always, I ask, please smash that like button, subscribe, tap the bell for notifications. I'll keep drawing, and I hope you keep watching. And to all the artists out there, remember, the only way to get better at drawing is to keep drawing. So until next time, keep drawing.